Welcome to the I Dare You podcast. I'm so glad you're here because you're going to love our guest. She is Esin, and by the way, it's Pinarli,
Yes,
correct?
and you're the first podcast host in I don't know how long who's gotten it right, the name.
What?
Because it's not because they call me Esin, and they
Oh,
keep
no.
saying Esin, and,
Oh,
and
no.
so you got it right.
Good. Esin Pinarli. Now, she is a psychotherapist, licensed clinical social worker, master's certified addiction professional, and a whole lot more. Esin, welcome to the I Dare You podcast. It is such a treat to have you here.
Oh, it's such an honor to be on, Darren. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Esin, let's get into this. I've been
Yeah.
waiting to talk to you because we're going to talk a lot about relationships and how we can live a better life. I got to start with your background. In my research of you, your background on your website, you're a double major English literature and psychology.
Yes.
Tell me about that combination and how do you get into this vocation?
Yeah. So I've always been an avid book reader. I loved books since I was like really, really, really young. I used to read with a flashlight under my bed when I was supposed to go to
Did you?
sleep. And they would tell you your eyes are going to go bad. And here I am, I wear contacts, right? They were right, but I didn't listen. So I would maybe lose myself in the stories, and I was very interested in other people's stories and very interested in what is it like to be in somebody else's mind. And I just loved stories and poetry and literature and metaphors. I'm a very big metaphor person. And so I think, yeah, so I think psychology is like people's stories, people's brains, getting into their inner world. And English literature is sort of this, and I'm a writer. I love writing. I love expressing myself through writing. So it felt very like organic that it was like two of these passions, and they make sense to me because it's like people's stories, and then it's like literature with literary giants and people, and the classics.
It's great. Now that you said that, I'm just thinking back to my childhood. I remember that, yeah, I don't know why I'm thinking about this now, but I loved that book. And I'm gonna write a note. I'm gonna go back and reread that. How about for you? What are some of the books that you remember like, oh my gosh, just lit you up?
God, there's so many, but I was very into Emily Bronte, like Wuthering Heights.
Ooh,
I was, yeah, like very,
okay.
Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. I love the
See,
classics. Oh yeah, Toni
you're
Morrison.
you're
Very,
elevated.
yeah, I was always very interested in, like, the Scholastic Book Fair would come up and I would get so excited the night before. I would like, my parents were like, you can't get all of those books.
That's
And
so good.
I used to read about a book a day.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was like my favorite pastime with my father was he would bring me to the bookstore.
Oh
And
my.
I used to read the Babysitter's Club also. So not only was I elevated, but I was also into stories. Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley Twins.
Okay, well, that's the perfect transition. Let's get into this because
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast that you gave, and you talked about the role of the nervous system in healing painful relationships. So let's just start right there. What role does the nervous system play in our relationships day to day?
The way that we connect to people and the way that we relate to people is through our nervous system. Our nervous system designates if somebody is safe or not safe. And so we're always subconsciously, there's like this internal scan detector that decides if a person is safe or not safe. Are they warm? Are they inviting? Are they familiar to my nervous system? Meaning, have I experienced a person similar to this with these characteristics or traits? The nervous system decides if I'm going to come forward or if I'm going to pull back. And the nervous system only wants familiar on a subconscious level. So if you somehow feel familiar to me, where it's the way you speak or the way you move, we have what's called mirror neurons, and they detect if you're safe or not safe for me. And that means, have I ever met anyone like him before? Is he exhibiting any qualities or characteristics of something that's familiar to me? And then my nervous system says, go for it. Otherwise, if my nervous system deems that person as not safe, I most likely won't connect with that person or, try to form a relationship with that person. And a lot of times people are like, I don't know why I'm so attracted to so and so, or I'm drawn to this person. And it's like, well, your nervous system did an internal database scan, and it's called neuroception. And that's
Wow.
a polyvagal state. That's a created by Stephen Porges, who's the creator of polyvagal theory. And what neuroception is, it's our internal self-protective mechanism. It's a threat detector to decide if somebody is safe or not to be in a relationship with. That doesn't mean they're safe. It means that there's familiar, because familiar means safe to our nervous system.
Okay. All right. So now I'm going here now. This is below consciousness, or
Below conscious awareness, and then you'll call it fate.
tell me more.
So unless you make the unconscious conscious, you'll make decisions based on your subconscious programming that has been developed from early childhood. You develop a template and a paradigm, and you develop this whole entire sort of image of unconscious love. That's what imago stands for, what love is
Okay.
supposed to look like, what connection is supposed to look like. And until you make the unconscious, which is the same thing as subconscious conscious, you're going to make relational choices based on subconscious programming.
Okay. Well, so you're telling me though that I can influence this, I can change this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How do you go about then assessing that? And by the way, are we talking now about attachment styles? Is that what we're
Well,
talking about?
right now we're really talking about polyvagal theory and the nervous system and how the nervous system basically makes a decision. Attachment styles are adaptations. So they're basically ways that we adapt in order to form connections with people. But the nervous system is the driver. So the nervous system plays a role no matter what attachment style that you are. So it basically, decides who we're going to connect with and who we're drawn to and who we're attracted to.
All right. So now let's talk about that, the attraction. We've heard the saying, opposites attract. Where does that fit into this? Is that an old wives' tale, or is that truly based in science and it gets down to the nervous system?
Opposites do attract because it's usually some people they're mirroring the lost parts of ourselves. So what I mean by that is imagine me and you meet
Yeah.
and you seem very even keel and calm and composed, and you're a little calmer than me, and I'm more animated and I speak a lot and so there's a part of you, let's just say, that also wants to be like that, but is not so much in touch with your own internal world and has been running away from it. And so when you see me animated and expressive and sharing feelings and thoughts, but you're not used to doing that, you're going to be drawn to that. So there's that piece. And I am like, wow, this man is really seems confident. He seems emotionally regulated. He appears stoic. He appears confident. And I would like more of that because I feel so much and I
I
feel
see.
so deeply. And so that's the attraction, right? It's like the lost part of ourselves on some level. And then it's also what's familiar. So we tend to pick romantic partners that resemble the unpredictable caregiver.
Oh, okay. Well, I got to know more about that. In what
Yeah.
way? In what ways?
So,
Unpredictable caregiver, meaning
right.
our
Meaning
whoever.
sometimes they give you closeness and attention and sometimes they pull away. Or sometimes they're really hard on you and punishing, and then sometimes they're inconsistent, or it's not these big major things always. They're micro misattunements, right? So they're not consistently. So they might work a lot and be not available. They might be neglectful unintentionally. They might not. This is not about shaming, blaming people. This is about, is there a parental figure that I felt like I was either seeking their approval or they were inconsistent in terms of giving me love, attention, attunement, praise. And they were actually not just physical proximity available to me, but emotionally available to me, tuning into my needs and my emotional world. Did they ask me, what do I like? How do I feel? And if I was upset, did they come forth and did they offer their nervous system to co-regulate with me? Or
Well,
did they say, you know what, you're upset, I'll give you something really big to get upset about. You know what I mean? I'll really give you something to get upset about. So then, right. Yeah. So then you're shut down by that, and you're forever seeking the approval of that parent, and then we end up marrying our unfinished business.
Okay, well that might be the quote. That might be the title of the whole podcast episode right there. That's
Yeah.
really intriguing.
And and our romantic relationships are a subconscious attempt for two things. One, to get needs that weren't met in childhood, to finally get it right and to close a childhood loop, or to finish childhood in the way in which we would have wanted to. So marriage is just a long conversation.
This is deep.
Yep.
We're going deep quick.
Remember, English literature meets psychology, right?
All right. Well, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Here we go. I've heard you talk about early attachment wounding. What is that? And how, when we talk about early attachment, how early are we talking? I mean, how old am I when I start experiencing potentially early attachment wounding?
It starts in the mother's womb.
What?
And it starts in the mother's womb. Yeah. So if you are absorbing your mother's nervous system when you're in. Is your mother anxious when she's pregnant? What is she going through? What's happening in her relationship with her partner while
Is that right?
So if your mother is anxious when you're in her stomach, you come out primed for fear.
I am catching up on this. That's why I'm
Yeah,
quiet.
that's okay. And that's called implicit memory, right?
Okay.
So implicit memory begins from when you're in your mother's stomach until you become verbal, which is usually around 3 or 4. From when you're in your mother's stomach up until you become verbal, you are a sensational being, meaning I'm experiencing everything through a sensation. I'm feeling and absorbing energy, and I'm picking up on my mother and father's nervous system states. I'm picking up on, if I'm hungry, I cry. If I want my diaper changed, I cry. If I want affection and love, I reach out. And so if it's not received or my needs aren't met in those early formative years, it's what starts to form our attachment style and our inner biology and our sense of self. So the implicit part is important because it's from when you're in your stomach until you become verbal. Because you can't recall to me and tell me verbally what you experienced when you were in your mother's stomach or before you became verbal. Then around 3 or 4, it's explicit memory comes online. Now I can verbalize what I'm feeling, if I'm upset, if I'm experiencing something. And around that time, we become what's called egocentric, not in a pathological sense, in a sense where we think everything means something about us.
Okay.
So if mom is upset or dad is upset, we think we did something wrong and we internalize that. If mom and dad get divorced at 7, 8, 9, we think if we were a good girl or a good boy, they never would have left. If we fall on the sidewalk, we think the sidewalk is mad at us. Because we think everything means something about us.
Okay. So you brought up attachment styles. There's been a lot of it's been in the news a lot, and I've been hearing a lot about attachment styles. I am speaking probably on behalf of every parent that's listening. I'm replaying everything, my parenting style. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have absolutely screwed up my kids. I'm sure of it.
Don't you dare think like that. And that's the thing, right?
Right.
The most attuned parent, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry. You did the best you could with what you had at the time. And that doesn't make you, oh my God, I must have messed my kid up. I could have, no. Even if you do it perfectly right in terms of parenting, which is not, there's no such thing, we still get a certain amount of embedded trauma. We still experience a certain amount of relational injury. And what relational injury is, an attachment wound. So it's basically like I felt neglected, or like my dad didn't show up to my dance recital. I remember that, but he was working. And so I was looking for him in the crowd and wanted to see him applaud me, or I wanted to see him basically support me. And he wasn't there because he had to go to work, but I could internalize that at that time as him not showing up for me. And so I can think that that's inconsistent, right? So my attachment style gets formed by my primary caregivers initially how securely attached am I to mom or dad? Meaning, I know that they're there. I know they're not going to abandon me. I know they're always going to come back. I know that they're attentive to my needs. I know that they nurture my internal world. So if I'm upset, they talk to me about it. And so the most attuned parent, which is basically just saying the one who pays the most attention and is most connected to their child, is only 33%.
Hmm.
The way you increase that is by coming in and having a repair. So, for instance, let's say you're in the kitchen, let's say you happen to cook, and you notice that your child is interested in what you're cooking, but you're in a rush. You want to get food on the table. You're like, you got to get out of here. Come on, you got to get out of here. So, you didn't nurture your child in that moment's curiosity, right? And you told them to get out of there. So they felt like, okay, well, they don't want me here. So they left. And then if you go back in and you say, hey, honey, I'm so sorry. Daddy was in a rush and he was trying to get help mom or, help whatever, get food on the table. And I didn't pay attention to, were you interested in what I was doing? Do you like cooking?
Nice.
Maybe one day you and me can sit down and I can show you something.
Okay, I see that.
That's reattunement. So that increases to 33% to 35% to 37% to 39%.
This is fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, but now I'm listening, and here's what you have on your website, and I'll
Yeah, of
read it.
course. Of
It
course.
says, I subscribe to the philosophy that we have all been wounded in some way. And with the right tools and safe therapeutic relationship, we have this magnificent capacity to heal.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm listening to this in my car, driving around, saying, you know what? We've all been wounded in some way. You know what? I've had a pretty good life. I've had a pretty good childhood. I really haven't had any wounds in my life. You would say what to that type of mindset?
So I had that philosophy too. I
Did you?
thought to myself, parents are married how many years? I grew up in a wonderful family. I can't sit here and name any specific traumas to you. And it was the farthest thing from the truth.
Really?
Yes, because
How?
the more I trained in modalities, the more work I did on myself, memories started popping up that I hadn't, like explicit and implicit sensations started popping up. And what I recognized was that not I wasn't demonizing them, but what I recognized was I actually witnessed an anxiously attached mother and an avoidantly attached father, and I watched that dance and I absorbed that. And so I was their therapist from when I was like 7 on. And I didn't know. I didn't
Yeah.
know. My mom is my best friend to this day. My dad is my best friend to this day. They've been there for me spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially, above and beyond. They're married 50 something years, and so you could ideally, I would be like, I don't get it. Do I have, some of these, whatever would show up for me, right? A little bit of an anxious attachment style in romantic relationships. Why am I showing up like that? Well, I absorbed their nervous system. I witnessed my mother. And interesting enough, she's not an anxious woman, but she's an anxious attachment in romantic relationships. My father is more of an anxiously wired person, but avoidant in romantic relationships.
Hmm.
So the dance that I watched was that romantic relationships could break apart at any moment. They're fragile. I didn't know any of this, right? And so I
Interesting.
absorbed the fact that maybe I was absorbing that romantic relationships are fragile and they can break apart at any moment. And I'm the glue that keeps it together. And so I was reinforced by like going into one room and being like, what dad really meant to say was this. What mom really wanted to say was this. And then they would make up. So I
Wow.
didn't know any of that. I didn't know any of that. I wouldn't not be able to recall any of that. And then what I recognized also was, you know, we carry their trauma. It's ancestral trauma. It's through the bloodline. So what did they go through, right? So there's this scarcity mindset around money I noticed that my father had. And so I'm absorbing that, right? And so I'm absorbing my mother's fear because the only thing she gets anxious about was her family. And otherwise, she's a lady of leisure who could just get over stuff, and, kind of a very simple things made her happy. My father, on the other hand, was a deep thinker like me. We were both intellectuals. We were both very like interested. He's like 3 credits shy of a PhD. He was a mathematician, a successful businessman. So he thought in the terms. And so I was almost like the on some level, I was the intellectual component to him. So he shared a lot of things that he shouldn't have shared with me very early on. So I became a little parentified, and I was a little bit of the golden child. I didn't know any of this stuff. I was like, by all accounts, I've had no trauma. So trauma
Right.
is basically anything that I interpret that impacted me in my life. It's sizable and scalable, right? We're not going to sit here and say sexual abuse is the same thing as, you know, my dad not paying enough attention to me.
Sure.
But there's a lot of micro misattunements that create imprints, and they create what's called embedded trauma in ourselves. And so it's not like at 8 years old, dad got in the car and he just left. That's a very tangible trauma you can describe. Or this happened, this was really impactful. It's these mini traumas. So there's big traumas and little traumas. And
Hmm.
a trauma is basically how I interpret what is happening around me at that moment. And so for me, the weight and the emotional responsibility of being responsible for an adult marriage that I took on dysregulated my nervous system and made me hyper vigilant to be able to read the temperature and everybody's emotional temperature to make sure everything was okay. But again, by all accounts, married 50 years, great mom and dad, best friends. But those things are like little mini traumas that occurred to me.
That's fascinating. That Gene Hackman just passed away here,
I
what,
know,
three
God
months
rest his
ago?
soul. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just a fantastic actor. But do you happen to see the video of him? It was probably maybe 20 years ago. He was asked a question about his dad, and he relayed the question about his dad leaving the neighborhood. Did you see that video clip?
No, I didn't. Tell me about it.
Well, here's the interviewer said, "Tell me about your dad. I heard your dad left when you were a young boy." And Gene Hackman started to tell the story, and the story was that he was playing with friends in the neighborhood, and his dad drove away and just gave him a simple wave and was gone. And as Gene Hackman was relaying the story, he couldn't finish the story. And
Still impacted how many years later?
that was what, 60 years
It
ago.
doesn't matter how much we develop and how much our adult parts develop, we all have a little boy and a little girl inside of us that still holds an energetic charge around an imprinted memory that occurred to us. So that's
My.
something tangible, right? You can say that that's what happened. I actually, on that note, I recently saw a clip with Kathy Bates. You know Kathy Bates, who was in Misery? So she was talking about when she won an Oscar. I think she won an Oscar for probably Misery, I'm assuming, right? And I think her mother made a comment to her like, I don't know why they're making such a big deal about this. It's not like you solved, you know, world peace or anything, like
Really?
diminishing that. And she stated in that interview, she said, and I didn't thank my mom in that speech. And the person that was interviewing goes, "Yes, you did." And she goes, "No, I didn't." And so all of a sudden it popped up and he replayed it, and she did thank her mother. And
Really?
she you know what she said? She started crying and she said, "Thank you." And so what that means to me, and from my lens, is that she had a narcissistic mother who devalued and thought that she should have had the life that her daughter had and was jealous of her. And she internalized that. And then she felt guilty years later and was holding on to that guilt of not saying thank you to her mother, because I think she had passed at this point. I'm not sure. And you could see the energetic release and the charge that she had around that. And in that moment, you could see the freedom and the release from that like pain. So
That's
it's like
unreal.
it doesn't matter how old we are if
No.
we don't resolve some of these things. And here's the cool thing: you don't need to be like at 7 years old, this is what happened. I care more about, is there feelings that come up and do you get activated around things and get anxious or worked up where you feel like it's disproportionate to the event that's happening?
Okay, that's okay. Now you're hitting home. Sure.
You see what I'm saying? So then that means that it's hitting an old wound, or you're getting activated around a younger part of you that hasn't been resolved. I care more about the feeling. And some of those feelings, like, those feelings are implicit memories. You can't kind of put words to them. So I care about, how is it showing up in your life? What choices are you making? Is there maladaptive patterns in your life? Do you keep picking the same partner and it's ending badly? Are you dating narcissistic people and being harmed? Are you, what's your patterning? And so it's more about changing the patterns and the reactions. And it's like, I always say, adults don't throw temper tantrums. We can get angry, we can get upset, but it's usually a younger part that's showing up. It's usually a part that didn't get their need met, or a little kid throwing a temper tantrum that at one point wasn't heard or seen or validated in a moment, in an experience, very younger. And you can't always recall it, but if you notice that your reactions are bigger to certain events and really in relationships to people, it's disproportionate to what's going on. It usually is an older wound being hit.
So interesting. A mentor once told me to do this one little practice. I'll tell you what it was and see
So
if
yeah, I
this
would love to
tracks.
hear it.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, one of the things that I noticed in myself is that I will get insecure about something. Just it doesn't make sense. Why am I
Totally.
so
Yeah.
insecure?
Yeah.
And they used to really bother me. I used to experience shame and guilt, and Anyway, he said, you know what? What he said, what I do is I ask myself, what is the 8-year-old me? Why is that causing that type of a feeling? And I've been doing that, and it's fascinating what I'm learning about. I just kind of go back in time and saying, okay, what's that younger Darren? Why are you feeling this way? And guess what? I have answers.
See? So I call that pulling back the curtain.
Okay.
And then you're going in and you're doing this. When else have I felt like this? And what, it's a younger part showing up, even though you could sit here and tell me, I had a great childhood. I don't understand what's the problem. But the insecurity that you're saying, everybody experiences that, right? The imposter syndrome, or, right? And so, it got coined in 1978 and it was called imposter phenomenon. And so
Hmm.
it's this idea that you are a fraud, or you're going to be found out, or you're not good enough to be doing what you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing, or you don't earn a seat you shouldn't be at this table, which is a
Right.
metaphor, right? That particular table, or in that particular arena, or I'm getting insecure about it. And that is very, very common for almost everybody at some point experiences that fear, insecurity, because it's almost this memory of, so it's shame. And so everybody has shame, and people think shame is this huge thing. Shame is the idea of somebody witnessing your inherent wrongness or badness or not good enoughness, that they're going to see through, that you don't have it all together, that you don't know everything. We can't possibly know everything. And so you're going to be found out. You're a fraud. You're not competent. You're incapable. And interesting study about that is that there are differences in male and females, not always. What would happen is that when a male would get negative feedback about something, he would perform lower on tasks, and he would internalize that negative feedback because there was more expectations on the male in order to be a provider and to be right.
I can see that.
Women don't have as many expectations. And so when they got negative feedback, they worked harder and overcompensated on these tasks in order. And so when we work harder, or we're workaholics, or we're overcompensating, we're trying to avoid shame. We don't want to feel that insecurity. So I'm going to overwork, I'm going to overcompensate. And if I don't, then I feel this. But it only lasts temporarily, because the goal is, where's the shame coming from? What is the shame? And how do I unburden that shame? How do I move through that shame and recognize that it's just a part that's showing up that is holding an energy that it is getting hit in certain scenarios and certain relationships, and it's creating insecurity, it's creating fear, it's creating, and then am I overcompensating for it? Am I, I'm going to work harder and prove, because we're trying to outrun shame instead
Okay,
of
I think
sitting with the shame and exploring it like you did. Your friend gave you an amazing tangible exercise.
it's good. Well, before we go any further, for this conversation is fascinating. For those who are listening who really want to spend time in learning more and working on themselves in this area, what should they pursue? What types of work should they yeah, what should they do in order to learn more about this so that they can heal their painful relationships?
So if they're in a relationship, a romantic relationship, I'm also a couples therapist. I'm trained in Imago. And
Hmm.
Imago is all about this idea that we get wounded in relationship and we can heal in relationship.
Hmm.
And so couples therapy, I think, is great, because what's beautiful about Imago therapy is that you get to do your individual work with your romantic partner, right? But we have other relationships. We have relationships with family, we have relationships with colleagues, we have relationships with friends. So I think pulling back the curtain and either working with a therapist or a coach, and I like to do things that go beyond talk therapy. So I think people, but remember, you have to meet people where they're at. You can't just go in and do what's called, inner child work, is what you're talking about, and you exploring the younger parts of yourself. So I work with IFS, which is called internal family systems. So what that is, that we have an internal ecosystem, which is a collection of different parts. And it's really just to become more aware of self and become more aware of who you are and become more aware of certain parts. So if I have actually a guide on my website that could,
About this.
yeah, so it's becoming more aware of self. And there's like specific exercises and prompts to guide you through. And then there's another one coming out, which is called Reclaiming Your Whole Self. And that has even more. And they're going to be available on my website and on my Instagram. And so I would start there.
Good. So this is the Internal Family Systems Workbook, correct?
Yes. It's a mini workbook to just start to examine who are you and what parts of you are there, and basically exploring the inner terrarium of your rich internal world and getting to understand who you are and what parts you have, because you are beautiful and magnificent. You're a masterpiece and a work in progress.
Okay, I love everything about that. So this is now Internal Family Systems Workbook. Where would I go to learn more about that? What's your website address? And
Sure. So it's eternalwellnesscounseling.com. So the workbook is on there. And one of my teachers is Richard Schwartz. He is the creator of IFS. And one of the
okay,
books that I really love is, it's called No Bad Parts.
okay,
So I love
wonderful. So
that.
everyone, check that out. And by the way, your Instagram, you are a fantastic follow on Instagram. I'm
Thank
sure you've heard
you.
that before.
Thank you.
Your Instagram handle is what?
So yeah, I always get it confused. Let me look at it. It's because what I originally wanted wasn't available, and so you have to, like, take whatever. So it's my name, which is Esin, Esin Pinarli, Pinarli underscore LCSW. And I talk a lot about attachment styles in there, people pleasing, codependency, and it's basically my love letter to my younger self of all the things that I wish that I knew. So I try to provide educational content, and if I could plant a seed for somebody, and that's where a lot of my free guides are going to go up as well.
Okay, that's great. By the way, quick time
Sure.
check.
Of
Are you okay
course.
if I go for another
Of
5 to 7
course. Yeah,
minutes in
yeah,
this?
of
Okay,
course. Of
because
course.
all right. So you brought up your own journey, and I sounds like you have your story to tell about how you've worked through this. You're not just some academic that is just talking to people, but you got your own personal journey in this area. If you don't mind me asking,
No, of
what
course.
has been your journey and how has it influenced your work today?
I think we have to do our own work in order to help other people walk alongside them in their journey. That's always been my philosophy. And I think that the more you explore your own personal journey and really kind of understand how you operate, then you become a couple of steps ahead of your own wounds, so your stuff doesn't get in the way of helping somebody else, right? I see a lot of therapists that don't do their own work and they get activated by clients, which is okay, right? Because we can repair with people. That's part of like, creating a really good relationship is the art of rupture and repair.
Hmm.
And what that really is just a moment of disconnection or a disagreement, and we can repair that, and then we can become even closer. We don't need to be afraid of conflict. And so my journey, for me, in like a brief nutshell, is I was definitely, because of the story I told you about being my parents' couples counselor at like 6 years old. I think I was I was very academic, very intellectually aware and smart at a young age, and learned how to read the emotional temperature of a room before I learned how to read a book. And so I became very hyper vigilant and became very aware of things, and I felt very deeply. And I also remember, it's also your innate temperament, right? We talk about nature versus nurture. I might be more sensitive than you, Darren. So what I take in and from my family is different than what you take in from your family.
Hmm.
So it's also external situations. What is my family's financial position? What is, you know, am I are they do they want more togetherness and closeness, or do they want more autonomy, right? Like my family was a little enmeshed and they wanted way more closeness, and I wanted more autonomy. And so it was like this delicate dance between togetherness and closeness and distance. Like they didn't even want me going away to college. So I think for me, at a certain point in time, I started drinking.
You
and
did.
i and i yeah, and I drank, like the rites of passage, like everybody else, right? I went to college, I was in a sorority, I drank in high school, I played sports. And at some point, I think that because my nervous system was so anxiously wired in terms of like being so hyper vigilant about anything, that the relief that I felt when I had that first drink, I remember thinking, this is the solvent. With this is the, oh, now I have relief. Now I don't overthink. Now I don't have to be thinking all the time. This feels more manageable. So it became my armor. And so at that point, and then I drank, like everybody else, went to college sorority parties, went away on spring break, had friends, whatever, but it progressively became something maladaptive that I was basically I was managing my anxiety with it, because I'm very like deep and I feel so much and I'm hyper vigilant. And so I think that the drinking wasn't serving me any longer.
Hmm.
And I decided to stop. I haven't drank in almost 16 years.
Good for you.
Yeah. And so
Good for you.
it was just and that's when I really began to feel. And
Really?
yeah. And then I was like, no wonder I drank. This is a brain that thinks a lot, that is deep, that is, wired very hypervigilantly, that is paying attention to everything. And I feel so deeply. No wonder I was like numbing that down. But here's the thing, when you numb, whether that's with alcohol or workaholism or food or, people use people,
Hmm.
to numb. They go from relationship to relationship to relationship in order to, they're using it as a solvent.
Yeah.
And so when you stop, you can't selectively numb. So the alcohol not only numbs you from the anxiety or the inner discomfort or the insecurity or the fear, but also numbs joy and life and feeling fully alive. And it dampens that experience for you. So when I decided to stop drinking is when I really got more into, I was already a therapist, but I became more interested in exploring. There has to be a reason besides a genetic component in my family, because my grandfather had a drinking problem, my aunt, who's sober now, but there is a genetic component on my mother's side. And so, besides that, it was definitely an antidote or a solvent, because it gave me relief.
Fascinating.
And until it didn't, because it always turns on you.
Hmm.
So when I stopped, I started to really feel everything, the good, the bad. And that was when I got deeper into therapeutic work, my own, and training in modalities to advance myself so that I could be of service to a larger population, because no one's a twin. Everybody has their own unique experiences that they've gone through. So everything that I trained in, like brain spotting, imago, you have to do your own work. It's a
Crazy.
prerequisite. It's a prerequisite. And they push you. And I'm like, no, I had a great childhood. They're like, really? Well, what about this? And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, my parents are my best friends. I don't have any of that. They're like, so
Well,
why do you
okay.
think you drank? Why do you think you drank? Why do you think all those things, those probing questions. It's about asking the right questions.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And when I look at your background, you're like a superhero. I mean, you
Thank
specialize in
you.
imago, brain spotting, internal family systems, psychodrama, integrative psychotherapeutic approaches. One thing on a podcast, you even talked about what I call cold
Oh
plunge.
my
Do
God,
you cold?
I love it. And it's so funny because, the holistic psychologist just had a reel on that where she was saying it's not good. It's not good for
I saw
everybody.
that.
Yeah,
What do you
like it's
think?
not good for everybody. And a lot of people that don't like it were like, yes, I knew it wasn't good. It can put you into, so people who have trauma and PTSD, I agree with her
Oh,
because it does activate the fight and flight. But the whole point of it is, I've been doing it for years. It's a titrate, right? The whole point of that is that I'm going to get nerdy here. So, behind the left part of your brain is the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And that part of the brain is what's responsible for longevity, and it's what's responsible for making you capable of doing hard things. It's the seat of will. And so the cold plunge is a challenge. So it's hard. When you do hard things, that part increases in mass and density. And so the fact that you're doing that, you may temporarily be putting yourself into sympathetic fight or flight, but then you're going to come down and it's actually a parasympathetic activity eventually. So then it comes down. And then if you get in 11 minutes a week, your dopamine goes up by 350%, which is the
good grief.
pleasure reward neurotransmitter, and your norepinephrine, which is the neurotransmitter that's responsible for productivity, motivation, goes up 250%. But
That's unbelievable.
it's all about slow. And when I do it, I don't just cold plunge. I contrast therapy. So I do cold plunge and then I go in the sauna, and then I cold plunge and then I go in the sauna.
So we have a new place that just opened in Idaho Falls, Idaho. As I mentioned before we started recording, not a lot of new places open up in Idaho Falls, Idaho, but we got one. We got a plunge. It's called plunge, and so it's contrast
Ooh,
therapy. And
yeah.
so I've been doing this now for about 3 months.
How do you
So
feel?
I feel good.
You feel good, right?
Yeah, I'm doing 15 minutes sauna, then I go 3 minutes in the cold plunge
Perfect.
and
That's exactly how to do
sauna.
it.
So am I doing it right?
You're doing it perfectly right. That's
I tell you
exactly how
what,
to do it.
I've had alcohol. I've never tried any other drug. Um, but I'll tell you what, something goes on in my brain when I'm sitting in the sauna, getting out of the cold water. It's like this. Everything is on. It's like I don't know. It's weird. It's like a whole different world. Am I making sense?
No, you feel alive and energized and clear, and you have clarity because it's affecting your neurotransmitters.
Yeah,
You're getting more of that, the good. The hope,
it's good.
I call it hope molecules.
Okay. Well,
So
now
if
see, I
yeah.
didn't understand the brain talk, but hope molecules I can track, so that's
Yeah,
good.
so let's just call it hope molecules. And the fact that you're doing something difficult and it's rewarding in and of itself, and it's shocking your nervous system, and then it's shifting your nervous system.
It's
So
so good.
it shifts. Yeah, it's so good. I jump in the ocean all the time. People are like, it's so freezing. I'm like, I
Wait a
love it.
minute.
I'll do
You're doing
hot.
it in the ocean?
Well, that's a different thing. I do the regular kind of contrast, but what I'll do a lot of times is I'll do hot yoga. And
Okay.
right after hot yoga, I'll go to the beach and jump into the ocean.
You're the most interesting person
Thank
on
you.
Instagram. That's so
I
good.
love it.
It's
And
good.
again, I always say it's not a one size fits all. I always say if it doesn't apply, let it fly. What I always say is if it might not be good for you, but I always ask people to try things a couple of times in order to make that decision. And I have a lot of people that got into, because I'm very holistic. I love holistic stuff. And I mean, I have a holistic doctor. I work with the doctor. I send clients there. I believe in Western and Eastern. I have a lot of clients who I recommend acupuncture that works great for. So I believe in a very holistic approach to the person, that we are very complex. And I like to treat the whole system, right? I like to
Cool.
acknowledge that. And my biggest thing is connecting with them and them feeling like we have this secure attachment, and that I am working on helping them become the best version of themselves. And I'm honored that they invite me into their world enough and feel safe enough to share. And then I just walk alongside them in order to help them feel more empowered, and also to sort of like resolve some unresolved wounds that they've been carrying through like brain spotting and IFS and somatic work. And just really treat the whole person. I stay in touch with the psychiatrist. I talk to the doctor. I like to have it to be a very collaborative process.
That's great. Well, that brings us full circle to where we began this conversation. Just interesting on so many levels. Esin, in just a few minutes, in just 1 minute actually, I'm going to ask for your
Sure.
I Dare You challenge. This is your challenge to all of us, and this is what I do at the end of every episode. But before I do that, though, one more time, what's the best way to follow you, work with you, learn more about everything that's going on?
Yep. So my website is eternalwellnesscounseling.com. And in there you can book. I always offer a free consultation if anyone wants to work with me. I am a therapist and a coach, so I could see people all over the world. And it's all about a good fit. So I offer a free consultation, because it's very important that we are a right fit, and it's free. And Esin Pinarli _LCSW. You can also reach out to me through there. And I have a lot of free resources and guides both on my website and more coming up. And you can also book with me on Instagram as well. So I would
It's
say those are
wonderful.
the two ways. Yeah.
Well, get ready. Get ready. A few I Dare You podcast listeners are coming your way. I can feel it. All right, Essen, here's your chance. What is your I Dare You challenge for all of us? It's the one thing that you would dare us to think or do to live a better life. What do you think?
To think or do to live a better life. To choose something that you've been scared to do, but you feel called to do, and take a step and just do it while feeling the fear anyway. So pushing through something, whatever it is for you. Does somebody want to start a podcast? Does somebody want to write a chapter in a book? Does somebody want to start dating, but they're scared to get in the arena?
Mm-hmm.
Go on one date. Go on, face your fears, because when you face and challenge, you can do hard things. Your window of tolerance and your capacity for handling difficult things increases.
I never do this, but I have to ask you a follow up on that. And then
Yeah,
I
of
am going to
course.
let you go.
Yeah.
You brought up fear. Quick follow up on that. You have on your Instagram, it's a post, and it is, what if your fear is actually a compass? Something feeling uncomfortable? Good. That might just be your next invitation for growth. Tell me more about how this fits into what we've been talking about.
Because fear is a compass. If you're scared of something, it's what's going to make you break through, right?
Really?
And yeah, because it's like, if you're scared of it, the power and the fear that you're creating around it is basically, what are you really scared of, right? What are you scared of? I'm scared I'll look stupid. I'm scared I'll fail. I'm scared. Okay. And so what if you fail? Well, then I'll feel bad. And what if you feel bad? You can handle it, right? And so fear is actually directing you. If I'm scared to do something, it's like that fear, but also there's a calling to it. That's what I want people to pay attention to. It's like, I really want to do that, but I'm scared. That is your compass. It means that you need to push through that fear and challenge yourself, because you wouldn't want to do it. You wouldn't have a desire or a feeling to be called towards it, but yet you're scared to do it. And remember, anything new is going to create fear. Anything that is different than what you've done. But that's how you break patterns. That's how you change. And so if you stay in the familiar, and you keep doing what you're doing, you don't grow or evolve. If you don't bleed, you don't grow.
Okay. Well, that's a perfect way to end. Essen, that's a perfect way to sum up this I Dare You podcast audience. You're talking our language, and a lot of people are nodding their heads. So everyone, make sure you are checking out Essen on her website. Also, make sure you also check out Internal Family Systems Workbook on Instagram and also on her website, eternalwellnesscounseling.com. And Essen, I got to tell you, you win for the most fascinating discussion of 2025. I could talk to you for the
What
3
an
hours.
honor. Thank you so much. That means so much
Yeah.
to me.
Well, thank you again for spending this kind of time with us and for the insights.
Absolutely.
It's been wonderful connecting with you,
You
and
as
also thanks for
well.
being here.
Thank you so much for having me on.